You can start the meeting whenever you guys want to.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, everyone, let us start. It is Wednesday, January 6th. Our meeting for Regs and Legal subcommittee to the sewage group discussion group is starting now. I don't have any opening remarks. And I think the first thing that we need to discuss is our next meeting. So we all are meeting as a group next Wednesday. So I was hoping after we go through this survey that I have in our agenda, that we could potentially do another date before that whole meeting that we have with everybody else. Does everybody or anybody have any time constraints or limitations on Monday or Tuesday afternoon? You can always email me afterwards, and I want to make sure that we in line with Peter to make sure we have the time available on YouTube as well. Okay, so that's
I'm
just
free.
okay.
Sorry. Monday afternoon between 3 and 5 would be best for me.
Monday 3-5.
Yep.
Does anyone have a problem with that?
No, 3 o'clock works for me.
Works for me too. Peter, is that available?
Can you repeat that one more time? Sorry.
Monday at between 3 and 4:30 or 3 and 4.
This Monday,
This Monday, the 12th.
12th between 3 and 4. Yeah, currently it's open, so that works.
Excellent. So can we all make a vote to have it on Monday, the 12th at 3 o'clock? Great. Okay, so the second thing I wanted to talk to us about is a draft survey I had sent out to you guys. I had sent it out based on our conversations for the last couple of months we've been having, and I wanted to go through each and every one of the items. One of the reasons why I wanted to bring this all together is that we have to make recommendation in next week's group. And I think if we do the survey together, that we will be able to align our recommendations with like a first and a second choice by doing this. But we also have to look at each question and really think about the benefits for the environmental health, environmental protection, as well as for development, because that's what we were charged with, right? So I would just wanted to go through the survey and ask any questions, see if you guys had any comments or feedback, and then we can go from there. A few people, though, who couldn't make it today did fill it out already, and they gave us some great responses that I can share with you guys towards the end of the meeting. So, Peter, is there any way you can put that draft survey up for us?
Can you guys see this?
We can see the email. Yes.
Or I moved it to the survey. Can you guys see the survey?
Not yet. No.
No? Okay, wait, let me redo this.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the first question we put in there was, I put in there was for the training. It may not even be needed. I think I would like to refer to Ms. Miller or Ms. Dante Costa for that. We might be able to just take that question off because the first question was just talking about phase 1 and phase 2 training.
Yeah, our perspective on this is that, we support it, but it doesn't need to be included because we're already in the process of updating and codifying what's currently called phase 1 and phase 2. And so when that happens, those updates will be included in the reg. So it's not that they're being omitted, it's just that they're a work in progress.
Do you want us to delete the question? I mean, like, this is a working group for all of you guys. We can just take it out.
Yes.
Is that good? Perfect. Excellent. Okay. So the next question was about mandatory soil and field training. Does anyone have any strong objections to the way that the question's worded, the answers, any kind of conversation that we would like to have on it?
Hey, Sonia.
Yes.
Hey, second choice says align it with certification cycles. There's currently no certification. You get phase 1 and phase 2, you're locked in for the rest of your life.
That is correct. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the question underneath it about continuing education. And we had talked a little bit briefly about what it would look like annually, for us, and I don't know if the other sanitarians feel, but yearly training for soils maybe not be needed, but maybe every 2 to 3 years or even an initial. Again, we could change that for just putting yes initially or not. Is there any other way anyone wants to add anything to that answer? Bob?
I mean,
At this point,
Oh,
that Massachusetts, they're in a 3-year cycle for CEUs, and it works out fantastically. I think it's very good. I go to states where the CEUs are annual, the classes seem watered down, and they kind of they're repeated. But I find that 3-year cycle, people get engaged. It's not just, oh, I'm here for the CUs. It's, oh, okay, we're getting updated. And also given that our Connecticut cycle for the regulations are pretty much every 3 years or have been in the past, that would be also a good time for reg updates and doing an annual training. So really bringing into an annual conference of some sort to get our CEUs training and all that for everybody from the top down.
Excellent. Excellent. And I do want to just add before we go to Miriam that we are talking about long-term and short-term. So if there's any comment of we're not going to have the money for that, understood. That's why we're kind of separating them between short and long-term, and then talking to DPH and DEP as well as what can be actually done. All right, Ms. Miller, please go ahead.
Understood. Thank you. And you can just call me Miriam. Just the general comment we have on training is that, in general, we're supportive of CEUs. I think it's important, especially as technology is changing in this field. But I think one thing that we want to contemplate in this working group is who's going to develop the trainings. We have a training platform called CT Train where we can host the trainings at a minimal cost. But the training development is really where you get into the expense. And so I think that's something we can decide we want the training and what we want the training on. But when you're kind of assigning responsibility of who's going to develop that, that's where it gets a little more complicated.
Would you guys be able to provide us something with if you want a training program, this is how many employees are going to be needed at DPH or DEP?
So I work for DPH. So I guess, and sorry, I'm off the camera. I'm eating my lunch. I think the question really are you asking what the cost would be for DPH to develop the training?
Yes.
We can look into that. It's not historically something that we would do in terms of training development. But if if the recommendation and legislation came out that, the ask is DPH to develop the training, we would respond with a legislative, a fiscal note. But I would say a good way to not make it cost the state money is to just have some sort of private entity develop the training. Because it's possible the trainings exist and they just need to, a national organization has a training or something it's possible they exist. So we should also make sure we're not reinventing the wheel and they just move over to our training platform so that it's in a centralized location. We can track who's doing it and who's not doing it.
Excellent. Okay, that lit up the board too. Bob Smith, you go first, then Dante, Jim King, and then Rob Miller. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Yeah, I'd agree with Miriam. Initially it's all right, if we say yes, we should do this, there is nobody that can offer it right now. Having been on the other side of some of those CT trains, you turn it on, you do something else, and you just click on the answer. It's not terribly worthwhile. I don't know if that's, I'm a firm believer in either a Zoom platform or in person for training. You get better attention and you're easier to respond to questions that way. Nationally, I don't think that's the right answer to go because it's different. State of Connecticut has different regulations than the state of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New York. So a national certification, I don't see that as being the way to go. I do support the idea of training, and I do support the idea of a certain number of CEUs, if you will, just like we have to do now with FDA food code. They found a way to make that happen. And the food service program offers a whole bunch of training that you can get CEUs on. I don't see any of that coming out of environmental engineering anytime soon.
Yeah, I can respond to that really quickly, Bob.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Because I was actually
anyhow.
I was just in a meeting on this where we referenced the food training programs. We're bringing trainings that are already developed elsewhere onto CT Train platform. That's what we're doing for food service as well, which is why I've proposed it, so we can keep it consistent among the programs.
Bob, are you good?
Sure.
I just wanted to kind of piggyback on him with the whole field training. That field training with septic systems is a really important. That's the only thing I want to comment on. Go ahead, Go ahead, Dante. Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I also thought of the food program. I mean, I think the way that works and actually, will be codified as well is like we set standards for sort of what we could approve for externally, a third party's program, like contact hour or continuing education program, right? So that would be sort of thinking about what does the training need to include, and what are the minimum standards to make sure they're quality, but we wouldn't be the ones necessarily developing the training in-house, but we would sort of approve and then put them forth the way that they would for a food program, or a lot of our licensed professions, in environmental health and across the board, where we say, this is how many hours of continuing education you need to do. This is when you need to do them. And then this is sort of the content you need to cover or the type of training that you need to look at, so that it gives flexibility. But I think it's a really good point, actually, Bob, about tailoring to the Connecticut regs, because we have our own way of doing things. And so that is an open question of who would have the expertise to develop trainings that really work for our approach to septic in our state.
Sonia, you're on mute.
I was like, go ahead, Jim. Sorry. I was gonna
Oh, no worries. I was just going to say that it seems like everybody already knows this. There's a lot of organizations out there who have lots of different trainings, whether, it's organizations South, NARA, and a lot of them will let you tailor their work. So we won't be starting from scratch. Should be great.
I just wanted to add real quick before I go to you, Rob, that even having some YouTube videos like this to going through an actual final inspection, I know that costs money for people to develop those types of things, but they really are tailored for Connecticut. Even somehow like reading a soil test, that kind of thing would be really helpful, or going through elevations so that all of our sanitarians could reference it, because I know I would. I'm just throwing that out there. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I was just going to add to some of what's already been said on the same topic. Yeah, there are existing contractors within the state of Connecticut that have worked with the Connecticut Environmental Health Association to conduct septic system on-site evaluations and trainings. They already exist. They've already got a curriculum set up, which is tailored to Connecticut Public Health Code. They were designed by former sanitarians, who are knowledgeable on the matter. So there's existing programs out there.
Go ahead, Dennis. Thank you.
Yes, just wanted to chime in. There's a lot of great national resources, as Jim has mentioned. NARA has a whole wealth of information, training courses, and I think each state, as I travel the country, I give presentations at all the different associations throughout the US and Canada, and they all kind of evolve to the same thing. There's a category, state specific. Okay, let's test holes, let's go out in the field, and then there's generic things. A big thing now is safety in the industry, and that would I think I want to say generic, but pretty much generic, right? And there's other basic generic things, good wastewater practices for installation or wastewater sample collection. I mean, it goes on and on and on. That could be generic topics. And then some associations say, look, you got to get 5 credits in person, and then the other 5 you can get in person, or you can go online, as long as they are, quote, approved, by the state or whomever, to say, okay, all these are qualified and they meet the criteria, so to speak. So
No,
anyway,
I like that, Dennis. And also, like what Dante just said before, because I think we get so much information in NARA and all those other national organizations, having like DPH going through and saying, okay, these are the ones that are relevant to Connecticut, and being able to use them, I think would really kind of merge both the state national standard as well as being a little more tailored to Connecticut specifically. Go ahead, Bob.
I'm going to put in a shameless plug for Cowra. Jeff Polhemus and I are the two instructors that teach the installers course. I've been doing it for over 10 years now, and we've got, I think it's a high 80s, low 90% success rate on first attempt to pass in their license. So I don't think we got to go too far nationally. We could certainly look right here in the state of Connecticut.
Colorado is wonderful. Yes, absolutely, Bob, and I agree. And I wish we could have that kind of pass rate with our RS exam too. Just going to throw that one out there. Okay, so that's great. We talked about it, and one of the things I'm going to do is after we go through all these today, one thing I would like to look at is how each one of these questions is going to benefit the environment or development, and we could pass those through by email and talk about them on Monday as well. Okay, can we go up a little higher on the sheet, Peter? Okay, so soil scientist involvement. Just curious to see what everyone thinks about that. I have my own opinion, but I would like to hear what everyone else has to say. Anyone want to talk about it? Jim King, I got the heads up. Go ahead, Bob.
I was going to say, I'm trying to remember how to put that raise my hand thing up, but here we go. I know Chestercott used to have a local regulation that said you had to get a soil scientist if you were between these two periods, days on the calendar, if you will.
That's good.
Yeah, and it truly depends on how you go about each district or department does this. If most repairs and new are all required PE design at Torrington Area Health District. A soil scientist could be the third party mediator, if you will, such that if the engineer and the sanitarian on site just can't come to an agreement on whether or not that is or isn't redox morphication or modeling, then you get a soil scientist in there to kind of break the tie, if you will. A lot of it truly depends on the experience. If you've got a bunch of younger sanitarians that may not have been to this field training event, the training that they get in phase 1 and phase 2 for reading soils, from my understanding, is woefully inadequate. So if they get the training that's hosted by CHA, that's good, but depending upon how much they do. Some of the bigger cities at health departments that have very few septics per year, you may not be current. So there's good reasons, but I don't know that we can nail them all down to just, these few items when a soil scientist would absolutely be required.
Go ahead, Dante.
Yeah, so I mean, currently the local director of health or the commissioner has authority to require a soil study in areas of special concern and with design flows over 2,000, right? So I think, we talked about this internally, and I think we want to make sure that nitrogen sensitive areas or whatever the whole group ends up recommending in terms of either environmentally sensitive areas, nitrogen sensitive areas, is explicitly included in areas of special concern, but it wasn't clear to us what needs to be added in addition to what's fundamentally already there. And I think in terms of AT, it just seems a little premature.
Yeah, no,
So that would be our
understand.
feedback on that.
Okay, you're right there. For me,
And
it's just go
we
ahead.
can submit this in writing. Like we can give you our responses in writing as well, just so you have
Okay, that'd be great. I know
the
that we're in a
feedback.
table. I don't
I
want
know
to
it's
burden
tight time.
everybody, but that would be great. And honestly, what I always thought was these areas that you have sandy soils where redox is extremely difficult to find them in areas like that. And yes, we even have the ability to ask for an engineer and a soil scientist, even for repairs and B100As. That's just the way it is down here. It's not in the technical standards specifically to that. My big concern is these large systems. I know that Matt and Sean, they're great. They'll come down to us, but you only have so many engineers. If we have a big pickup in systems, the last thing I'd want is the sanitarians that may not be as familiar with soils, judging soils and doing soils with someone who may not be as good of an engineer as well at reading soils. And that is where our potential failures could really occur. And so for me, it was just not so much as that as more nitrogen sensitive areas and large flows where DPH can't come down.
I just want to make sure I understand that. Is that more of like a capacity issue with access to the soil scientists and not so much an authority issue?
What do you mean?
Like, are you saying that the challenge is that it's hard to get the soil scientists? Or are you saying that there's it doesn't sound like there's a problem with the authority to sort of require.
Correct. We can do it whenever we want, but do people do that? No.
Okay.
So yes, we can. I mean, because again, for us, like the soils are the most difficult part on the shoreline. We can't trust the modeling. We more things should be done for us in our area, like monitoring around high tide cycle, a king high tide, that kind of thing. Which again, it doesn't really go into it, and I get it. We're only the small portion of Connecticut, but one environmental kind of protection, I think, would cover one section, and then the rest is regular. So
Yeah.
maybe not even over a certain gallons per day in regular, not sensitive areas.
Right.
I don't know how you guys would feel about that.
No, that makes
Which
sense.
is again why we put the survey out, because I would love to have those answers so that we can just kind of add them together and say this percentage wants this percentage would recommend that. Go ahead, Dodra.
Yeah, thanks. So I think, and I think I've mentioned before that DEEP is doing something internally now to review our own internal processes of like, how do we help standardize some of this and revamp it? One of the things that we are looking at is requiring a soil scientist, right, at some threshold. And it's just mandatory. It has to come in, it has to be there. And so for us, it provides consistency to the regulated community. It's not a cherry pick, right, from one office to another or one engineer to another. It just has to be there. It's just part of the process, and everybody knows to plan for it and include it, and that helps our review significantly. It cuts back down on the back and forth and the discussions that have to happen, because again, the state is, it's wide, it's big, and from sandy soils to clays and ledge, it is something we need, I think, all the time.
Okay. I agree. And like I said, for us, I might require them on the shoreline, but the town next to me, who's also under orders, may not. And I am concerned about the sand. Yes. Okay. Do we have any other comments on that one? I don't mean to be going quick, guys, but we have a few more questions. Any other comments on that? No? Okay. Can we go? Okay. So the next one. Thank you. Okay. So I know this is going to be a little more of an involved conversation. Code advisory committee versus, the way we have it. Some people just want it the way they have it. Fine. That's why I put all those in underneath it. I'm not married to anything, guys. I wanted to have this part to really get what you guys feel. Anyone? Okay. So I love to hear your answers then when we actually put out the survey, guys. I'm on the fence. Some of the stuff I'm concerned about. We had a pandemic, and I think a lot of that is where the Code Advisory Committee there was issues. Again, but we have to do so many different things during a pandemic level situation. Not even just us, but both DPH. So for me, I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that. And I'm like looking at some of your answers coming in, and I agree with them coming in. And I just think that's more of a robust conversation for the entire group. But I would like to get what we consider as an agreement before going forward. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I think the Code Advisory Committee is a great idea. It's filled, you get a room filled with a bunch of people with different experiences and different levels and from different parts of the state. And unfortunately, you can put all that stuff together and they have no teeth. So I think if there's a way that we can get them a little bit more skin in the game when it comes to regulations, et cetera, I think it would be the way to go.
Yeah, I think also because remember we have all these different people coming in, and there's no central person doing minute. I mean, maybe there is, but going forward, it'd be helpful if it was much more formalized. I guess that's the way I would state it. Go ahead, Miriam.
Excuse me, let me just interrupt real quick. This is Rob. Unfortunately, I got to bug out for another meeting. I think it's going to go short, so I hope to pop back in a little bit later. So hopefully
Thanks,
I'll
Rob.
be back. Yep. Bye.
Go ahead, Miriam.
Thanks, Rob. I also have to jump in a few minutes for another meeting. I do just want to say that the Code Advisory Committee currently does not overview regs. There is a formal process for regulations to be commented on that is statutorily required for every regulation. So just flagging that process exists for regulations, and what the Code Advisory Committee looks at is technical standards. And the Code Advisory meetings are technically public meetings, and subject to Freedom of Information Act. So just want to flag that this is a public forum. we can certainly, if there's concerns over meeting minutes and all of that, that's certainly something that we can look into outside of DPH, and we're happy to go ahead and do that. But I just want to be careful that we're not conflating what the responsibility of the Code Advisory Committee is. And I think that adding regulations to their purview is going to really complicate the regulatory process, given that there is a statutorily mandated process that all regulations in the state have to follow. And adding this in could create conflict and challenge for DPH to get regulations done in a timely manner. So I just want to flag that challenge. And, you know, I think it would be the department's recommendation that we keep, you know, the Code Advisory Committee focused on technical standards and let the regulations process stay as is, because that's a whole different set of statutes and a whole different beast.
Thank you, Vera. Yeah, and just remember too, these are long-term and short-term, and we're pretty sure not them all going to be done even long-term.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dante.
Yeah, and I just want to chime in. I mean, that's not to say that everyone who's part of the code advisory isn't a stakeholder in the regs, right? And so since, we've been developing our regs program at DPH, we've really focused a lot on sort of the informal engagement that happens with stakeholders across the board in developing regs. And so obviously everybody who's participating in the code advisory committee would be at the top of the list to provide early and frequent feedback on the regs at different points, acknowledging that there is a very, organized statutory process for rulemaking. And so that those things can happen at the same time, right? It's not to say that there's not a role for all that expertise in, providing feedback and engaging on regs separately, but I just wanted to sort of add that nuance.
If you guys have
and
a
make
way
sure the
to
door
like
is not
rephrase the
closed.
question too, like I'm totally game and would
Mhm.
love to see that. I get it. Like even if we wanted to say, okay, yeah, like the second one in, keep the rule advisory, but have DPH formalized process, that kind of thing. Whatever you guys respond to the survey too, we'll go out to the whole group too. Like later on, when we actually go tomorrow, next week, to talk about it. Do we have any more discussion on that? Okay. Okay. So legal. Okay. Should DPH maintain it? So the shared database for final decisions. Does anyone have any questions on that?
I can respond a little bit just from the DPH perspective. This is actually something we have a future goal of doing. It's just we don't have resources at this time. So like agency-wide, not just for septic decisions, but all of our hearing office decisions.
So
it's a
that
future goal.
That's helpful, Dante, because
Yeah.
I think I should rephrase that question. Yes, within appropriate means.
Yeah.
And make sure that we hammer down that appropriate means. Go ahead,
Yes.
Bob. You had your big hand up. I agree. Changes.
Yeah, and is this something that we can look at historically? There's a whole bunch of decisions that were reached that still are in place today, but a lot of us old timers have left and we took that knowledge with us.
Yes, you did.
So I think if we're going to do something, we should also see if we can start, going back to some of the decisions that were made and or findings, et cetera, so that they can still be researched.
Yeah, that would be the goal, is that we would upload, all the sort of historic decisions for reference. But I don't know when that will happen, but it is certainly something that we would like to do.
If you have the staffing and the funding, see, it all comes back together. Excellent. Okay, so anyone have any other questions? Because I'm going to put that into there and put the money thing in there too, and resources. Simplified appeals process, similar or no? Not even going to go there. Anyone have any comments on that? Good to see how everyone answers on that. Okay, so the next, Peter, can we go up a little further? The next couple of ones are really, we should really talk to nitrogen and environment, but we've been discussing these things. So it's kind of like, we may as well have our recommendations going into next week's meeting on what we think as a group, meaning nitrogen sensitive areas. And yes, I agree with Dante. This is like the most important part for us going forward with regulations. Even getting back some of the results, they're similar in nature from the ones that people have responded. So do we want to add anything to this? That would be my first question. Does anyone want me to add anything? Somebody did give me a comment, and I will put in there actually nitrogen nitrogen. Oh my God, I can't speak. Nitrogen sensitive areas. So I will add that on. Does anyone else think that we need to add anything else to this question?
Sonia, are we limiting it? As nitrogen sensitive is one topic as opposed to environmentally sensitive, which could include nitrogen?
Yes, so that's what the other committee is really focusing on, is that nitrogen sensitive, environmental sensitive area question. I have not been able to go the last couple meetings. I know they believe Audra had, sorry, I don't want to put you on the spot, Audra. Are they honing in on a nitrogen sensitive definition or?
No, so actually they just sent out today some of the things that we've already come to consensus on. It does look like there was some agreement in moving towards nitrogen sensitive areas, but that's not been defined and there's been no discussion on how to do that. I do want to make sure that we don't lose the other components of environmentally sensitive areas. They are one of the same, right? Environmentally sensitive areas is like an umbrella. And underneath that comes nitrogen sensitive areas, phosphorus sensitive areas, ledge, whatever it is, right? So I do want to make sure as we go through this process that we don't lose those other components.
Yeah, I want to chime in on this because we've had prior discussions. I don't remember honestly if it was in the subcommittee or the broader group, but the reason from our perspective why it could be important to limit it to the term nitrogen if that encapsulates what we all care about in terms of the broader environmental concerns. It's just that as an agency, we are tasked with the protection of public health. And
Right.
so if we're able to catch the other environmental concerns in those same geographic areas that we would define as nitrogen sensitive, then great. If
We want
not, then we need, and so that just ends up being a question of jurisdictional scope for our agency because we're the public health agency. And so we would need to understand like the impacts separately of, those other environmental concerns on public health. And we would need, just so that we didn't
Yeah.
veer
So
out
that-
of our lane.
Yep, and I can send you some stuff actually I was putting
That'd be
together the other day that might be helpful. So things like depth to groundwater, we're concerned about bacteria, right?
Sure.
So pathogens that potentially contaminate drinking water. Phosphorus, we're concerned more with freshwater areas, but it causes eutrophication, which then leads to harmful algal blooms in our drinking water sources. So there are definitely connection points between all those because as part of our water quality standards, we have to look at environmental, right? So our aquatic critters and such, but also human health. So we have standards for
Sure.
that as well. So we can help with that.
That's great. Yeah. And then just to build on that, it's like it prompts some questions in my mind because we, our proposed regs would require a nitrogen assessment. Would we then need to develop separate regulatory requirements for all the other environmental concerns you have? That's sort of a bigger can of worms and would require a lot of time and thought and understanding on our part because we don't typically get at it from the environmental angle, we get at it from the public health angle. So we would need to really understand the evidence for us as a public health agency to regulate for those other things.
So maybe we could take this topic and discuss it on Wednesday with everybody, meaning
Sure.
the entire group, because I agree with both of you guys. Yes, it would definitely a more robust conversation. And the question below that is kind of similar. It's probably going to need to be talked about by the whole group. I'm trying to, I saw some of the videos from the other ones. I'm trying to capture a little bit so we can have this conversation next week. The next one goes to climate change and vertical separation distances. So we did talk a little bit about this, even though that really isn't like our thing here, but we did talk a bit about it. I would like to know what you guys think.
I mean, I think I can always chime in from the sort of DPH perspective. Like this is something that our program has been interested in, but we would need to understand the evidence for adjusting, like, what's the rationale, what's the evidence base for adjusting the minimum vertical separation distance requirements in the reg. Like we just need maybe we just need additional study. Like I think there's sort of a knowledge gap, is my understanding. Brief lawyer's understanding of the topic, but yeah.
And it is all over the place. It is all over the place in the country. It really is.
Right. And so that's sort of a challenge that we need to spend time on.
And for me, it's like, of course, I'm going to go for the nitrogen areas, the sanified soils. Of course, I'm going to say, yes, I would think it's an increase, especially if we don't have soil scientists involved in the actual determination of that restrictive layer. That's all I'm going to say about that. I know that Dennis and Jim had said some things last time we were talking. Do you guys have any? I think one of you said like 3 feet, or not to put you on the spot, Dennis or Jim King.
Yeah. As far, I don't remember the conversation at this point. What we
I can't even
recommended.
remember which one of it was. Well, just certain states have up to almost 3 feet. I think.
Yeah, Massachusetts is 4.
4.
Yep.
But we're
Out
3
to
and 4
California.
depending on where you are.
Yeah, and
This
you
is
know,
so interesting.
or New Hampshire is 2, New York is 2. Get out to California, it's 5 feet or 6 feet because
Yep.
you know most places they have 300 feet to groundwater. But yeah, it varies nationally. If I had to guess, average nationally.
I'm going
3.
3 average. I
Mm.
was just looking at some
I'd say
yesterday.
around, yeah.
Yeah.
It's 3 to 4. I mean, and you got ones who, in Georgia, you get as close as 18 inches, 1 foot,
So
depending
that's
on
only for reuse, though, for Georgia. That's only for highly treated reused water. It's disinfected.
Did you
No,
look at
treated
South
at
Carolina?
I worked
30,
there.
30.
I ran that
I
program.
did too.
Mm.
Yeah, I believe South Carolina is 6 inches.
After treatment, or just in general?
Not that I want to go there at all. I mean, have our regs go that direction.
Right.
But
Part of it, right, is depth to groundwater. Like how close are we talking about seasonal
Mhm.
high water table? And then what kind of soils, right?
Mhm.
So water travels faster slower through different soils, right? So that makes the average, right? So that's really like the average that comes up with, and where does that anoxic zone within the soil table?
So if we're an outlier in the region, that would be really helpful. And then for us to understand sort of what is the actual evidence base that our neighboring like sister
Yep.
states use to set it at 3 feet or whatever it is, like just so that doesn't come out of nowhere. I mean, I think it's already a strong argument to say that we are way out of sync with neighboring states if that's the case. But then, just how did they reach that? Why
There,
is 3
there,
feet the standard? Like what's the, and does
there
that
is
apply in Connecticut?
Yes, there is publications that have been done, studies been done, probably decades ago at this point of like how far is far enough for bacteria. EPA just put out a new document, I think in 2025. It has to do with looking more at like viruses. Right. It used to be like pathogen was just considered fecal, right? Fecal bacteria, but now it's really looking at like what is virus, deactivation and stuff. And so there's a lot of information that goes on. They have a whole sector that is connected to public health and reuse water. So highly treated reuse water, if you were going to reuse that water in a building or something. But from that, there are some microbial studies and information. I'll see if I can put my hands on that and share it.
And it just goes for us down here again. Maybe that 3 foot isn't needed in an area that's not on the shoreline that doesn't have sandy soils. So these are the things too, is making sure that we're comparing apples to apples. Suffolk County, Barnstable, they're all very much involved in this stuff. Chesapeake Bay, all those kinds of areas have sandy soils, and I just want to make sure that when we do talk about this, that we are talking about regular. Yeah, why shouldn't it be versus in an area that's going to fly through it and not be treated? So. That's my thing on that. And we can start the conversation with them next week, and I'll let Jim know. I'll try to send something out to him and John, just saying that, hey, heads up, these are the two topics we would like to talk about as a group, and why. Does anyone have any other? One other thing I wanted to mention too. I mean, we're not really supposed to be talking about AT and stuff, but I do think that separation distances to groundwater, that's something that we should be able to talk about after we have advanced treatment. That's just my thought. I know we're not going anywhere near there, but having this conversation open and looked at on a continuous basis would be helpful. Okay, so this one's mine again. The B100A thing. I know I just put it for nitrogen sensitive areas. However, that's just defined. I know a lot of you guys aren't on the shoreline. I would love to know what you guys think, because down here, everything is built up. It isn't new construction. We have very, very little new construction. But what people think is new construction is taking down a house and putting up an apartment. That's not considered new construction. So new construction does have that overlaying of you need an engineer in areas of special concern. You need 100% reserve area. I'm not talking about regular B100As. Soils are fine. Code complying area, great. I'm talking more about the lands that are going to be flooded out. And those are the ones I'm concerned about. I was just curious, especially some of the sanitarians and the industry people, what you guys thought about that. Because I know reserve area is like a big thing for you guys. Dennis, you spoke about it last time. No?
Yeah. So I'm on the shoreline too, and spent my whole life down here, and I know exactly what you're up against, Sonia. I deal with it every day. Um, and you're right, a lot of the rebuilds. So let's say I have a 5-bedroom home and it's on the shore, and the lot is 50 by 100. There's no way that we can get a 5-bedroom home to comply with nitrogen sensitive areas, unless we probably go with AT or something, right? So I would think you'd get a lot of pushback from the home builders on anything too restrictive. So somehow we got to find a balance between that and public health, and you know try to please everybody, which is always hard.
And I just put the 100% reserve area to like start a conversation, guys. I wasn't saying that we had to go there.
I'm still against the 100% reserve area. I'm against it. It's not necessary. I see nationally what works and what doesn't work, and most states don't have that, and it's far an overkill. Again, if something goes wrong, we can just remove and replace what's there. Um, It'd be, like I said, it's nice to have a 50% reserve area, because if someone wants to go from 3 bedrooms to 4 bedrooms, that gives that homeowner a chance to upgrade, which is great. But I think, I just think it's overkill. That's all. We have plenty factors of safety in our codes.
What about the hydraulics, Dennis? That's actually kind of more of what I was.
The
Yes.
site hydraulics, I would even suggest something even more radical. All right, so MLSS, other states call it linear loading rates and that sort of thing. So you're looking at the site hydraulics. Site hydraulics should be based on actual flows and not design flow. The actual flows is what the system is going to see. The design flows are necessary, really not for, I'll say the biggest thing design flows have impact on are design life. Right? If we keep making systems smaller and smaller, and I see this from a national perspective, that like everyone says, oh, the actual usage per house now is 45 gallons per day per person, and there's documentation on it. So let's lower our design flow. And all they're doing is lowering design life of the system, really, when it comes down to it, right? Instead of a system lasting, take your pick. I travel nationally. I asked everyone this question: what's the design life of systems in your territory? And everyone kind of just hums and haws and say, well, yeah, I'd say about 20 years. So anyway, if we make systems smaller based on that, we just lose longevity. So anyway, keep the design flows higher, or where they are, to maintain our design life of systems. But when it comes to actual usage and hydraulics, I would go with actual flow.
Okay. Thank you, Dennis. Jim, you're next, and then Audrey's after that.
I was just gonna comment on something Dennis brought up and how the systems here in Connecticut are quite small. Our ELA equation does allow for some very high hydraulic loading rates to the soils. And some of them, I would say, are not supported by studies done by Segrest and Black and everybody else who's studied soil hydrology. And that would be a concern that I would definitely look at. And I know we've capped at 29.9, but it still allows for some very high hydraulic loading rates that we don't have, or that we allow, that aren't anywhere else in the nation.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Audra.
Yep. So I just did want to note, so one of the recommendations that Deep made in the nitrogen and environment group was that if the state was going to stand up an AT, right, not to get back to AT, but if they were going to stand up an AT program for something under 10,000, right, one of the things that is very reasonable is to reduce the reserve area to 50%, if not 25%, right? Because you're putting in a highly treated effluent at that point, right? And then it does just become a hydraulic issue of keeping it in the ground. So that is one of the things that we already put in front of folks.
Excellent. Okay, I didn't put it in for regular B100A. This really was, like I said, on the shoreline, we're tear down, rebuild, tear down, rebuild. And my biggest thing is just trying to make sure that we are protected, because those tear down rebuilds, systems could flood out if you put a lot of flow into them, and flooding in general, we know is increasing. And the sandy soils, I know that we're doing a big project over here in the center of Guilford, and because we have beautiful sandy soils, it's just shooting right through and hitting that groundwater table. So, this is where I am concerned with B100A, and I only put it in for nitrogen sensitive areas, however that may be. Obviously, you guys can see my position on that, that I would like to be a little more protective, but I think that would be an interesting conversation to bring up next week as well. Anyone else have any more comments on that or questions? Okay, and so the next one, can you go up a little, Peter? Now, this was just because we've been talking about funding and stuff, funding between DP and DPH. So it's just kind of a chart of what do you guys think? You know, should we add anything? Should we delete anything? DP and DPH, I'm kind of really looking at you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little tricky for us to actually weigh in on anything that's a request for resources. So I think we'll just have to kind of stay politely agnostic on this one,
Totally understood.
if that's okay. But
Yep. No,
we're
I get it,
listening.
Dante, I get it. We'll do the asking for you guys. Go ahead, Audra.
Yeah, I mean, I think any state agency, right? And so I'll put a plug in for DPH. Is always looking for extra support in terms of funding. You know, the retirement cliff really did a number on a lot of the state agencies and our ability to quickly respond. So whether it's to an environmental emergency or a public health emergency, but just to keep up with the economic boom for housing, right? So we do need the resources and tools in place to be able to support that growth. There's always a need for additional funds for training and certifications, regardless of how that occurs. That's something that's going to be necessary, because if you don't, then that cost gets put on, the developer or a builder or somebody else, right? We're just passing the buck down, and I don't think anybody wants to see that. AT is something that we do routinely already. I have one senior staff person, and then two junior staff people. And so teaching all of that stuff, right? I think Bob mentioned you took all your goods out the door with you and you retired. It's a lot. It's not, we're not making widgets here. It's a beautiful kind of marriage of geology and agronomy and, biology and engineering. It's complicated a lot of times. And so I think people are really expecting you to be able to like push the button and out comes the number. And it's not as simple as that. So always more resources are good for that.
And Audra, I have to say that I'm probably one of the towns that do deal with AT and large AT systems. And one of the reasons why there is a challenge is because you don't have enough people to actually review them. I totally understand that. And the other part is that most of these towns, we're going to talk a little later on about this, Audra, but most of these towns already have work done in the centers of town saying that we need to have large AT systems. Not only will it help for the actual pollution abatement, but it'll also help for economic development, meaning that you can literally start putting on things like residential on top of commercial, that kind of thing. But the towns down here, if you kind of communicate a little more, if you had more staffing to be able to communicate with us, you'd say that we have a lot of load testing. All right, now I'm doing a whole bunch of hydraulic testing on the grid, and so is Westbrook and Clinton. So like we could be there, but we definitely need you to have more staff if they really are serious about trying to increase development in areas that are fragile, meaning that the centers of town, again, they've all been here for a very long time. They're just overtaxed, but could be fixed in certain areas. Could really be fixed.
Yeah, and I think it's something we see routinely, right? So if the state of Connecticut is not going to look to sewer areas, right, along the coastline or wherever there are sensitive areas, then we do have to look at some alternatives here, right? Because putting in just conventional systems along the coastline is not a long-term economic solution for anybody. It's a short-term kind of vision and doesn't help the state long-term.
Which in the long run, we're going to need large AT systems to pull these systems, large AT community systems, which I was always a fan of the community systems, by the way, getting jurisdiction of those, but a large scale AT community systems off the shoreline at some point. I mean, I just don't see any other way. Go ahead, Dennis. Thank you, Audra and Dante.
Yeah, I guess I would just agree in general, but I think we should check the box for supporting, increases in funding and these things. And I think because if we do that and make that more aware to the home builders are the key, right? They're the ones who hold all the cards with the political powers that be. So if we tell them, look, if we're more staff so we can approve your project faster, what's one of their biggest complaints, right? Oh, and same thing with the engineer design committee, right? Oh, I put in a plan, it takes 2 months, 6 months, I don't know. I can't tell you, Mr. Developer, how long it's going to take, or Mr. Homeowner. So anyway, I think this is an area where we'd all be in agreement, and then we use the political clout of the home builders to get you all better funded, better staffed, better trained. And I don't think anybody would disagree with that. I think everybody on this call would say, yes, 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 check those boxes.
I think you might actually be surprised to see that they may agree with it too, the developers, by the way, Dennis.
Right. I agree. Yeah.
Go ahead, Audra. Thank you, Dennis.
Yeah, so I'll just add on to that, right, Dennis? And I appreciate that. I think one of the things that we see is, you can streamline processes and you can do efficiency gains within your process, but you still need folks. And I think one of the things that, occurred in kind of the bigger picture, take a step back here, was the subsurface systems and the Department of Health, and these systems were kind of out of sight, out of mind for a real long time. And it become real important in the last couple of years, right? And so now they're really seeing like we didn't put a lot of support and resources into them for decades. And now we need them, and we need to stand up those programs very quickly. And that can be done, right? Anything can be done with time and money and resources. And I think everybody wants to see that. They want to be able to be supportive, and they want to be able to process those things much faster.
I wish we could put that like into a statement. I think that's exactly what's been happening.
Yeah.
And it's happened
Yeah.
because, yeah, I'm more hyper aware of it because I'm on the shoreline. And we've been
Mhm.
talking about the towns that you go to down here, Dennis, Jim, I mean, you guys know, Old Saybrook, Clinton, we've had to be aware because we've been under orders. So
Yeah.
now it's kind of going around statewide, and now it is a much more robust conversation. And I'm actually glad it's happening personally. So that's a great way to sum that one up. Absolutely. The last one is kind of what I want. Please read the question. I got some great response from Audra and Tom Stanfield. Okay, I know it may sound unusual, but I would just like for you guys to read the question. Because detrimental effect on ground or surface water, that's part of a new development, right? Like that section is in a lot in the regulations. My concern with that is because if we get a developer coming in here, or a developer, if you have an environmental group that's trying to block a development right now, detrimental effect on ground or surface water. Well, we're already under consent orders. What is, I am concerned of another environmental engineer going through and saying, hey, I'm getting lawyers involved and saying, no, all of this is detrimental to the groundwater because you guys are under orders in the first place. So that statement, like, I would just love for someone to clarify it, because I think it does leave us a little more open in areas that are nitrogen sensitive to getting stuck in the legal battle that we don't want to be stuck in the middle of. So that's the reason why I put in there. Does anyone have any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, I talked with Matt a little bit about this, and I think, the goal, the intent probably originally was to keep it broad to allow local health officials to sort of exercise their authority to look at a variety of potential harms. And I think maybe the challenge is just, putting your foot down and deciding when that's going to be the case. So I guess I would be curious if there's a nuance, if the whole regs end up being sort of oriented towards nitrogen sensitive areas throughout, like there's going to be sort of special requirements there. Is there something unique to nitrogen sensitive areas where this comes into play? Maybe we could think about that. But, I think it's pretty challenging. I mean, we can't really give like interpretive guidance in the sense that this was designed to be, you know,
So, I
flexible.
think about a definition, Dante, and I get it. And for us, I'm
Mm,
not saying what way it should be, or even it shouldn't
mm,
be there at all. I'm saying is that someone's going to use that, and that is going to be a lawsuit.
mm-hmm,
I'm already starting to hear that kind of stuff. So when you have detrimental ground or surface water, Audra, you had some great comments on that, and you actually gave it, tried to provide us a definition, which I will send out to everyone when we're all done, by the way, guys, everyone's responses, so we can all kind of talk about it together. That detrimental effect, again, not to put you on the spot, Audra, but do we have a detrimental effect on our groundwater just because we're under consent orders? Or any areas that are on consent orders? I don't know.
I've never read the orders, so I say I don't know. I'm gonna defer. But I will say that that's something that we no, let's say it was a struggle in the Clean Water Act for a long time, because we use words like detrimental or adverse effect, and
mm-hmm,
over time, enough states and enough challenges and lawsuits have come through that we've really had to kind of narrow the field down to say, okay, what is going to be considered detrimental? What would we use as a definition, and then what do we use as kind of the backstop for boundaries? And so again, I propose something, right? You feel free to send it out. But it really was in hopes of trying to narrow it down to, there were like three pillars of detriment, right? There's public safety, there's water quality, and then ecological integrity, if I'm looking at it through my lens or the Clean Water Act. So I'm trying to put if I'm DPH hat on, how do I make this so it's something that people can understand and they can develop around, right? So when I think about public safety, I think about pathogens and nitrogen, right? Like those are the two big ones that we talk about all the time. So if somebody is exceeding, 0 for total coliform, or nitrates above, I would say a target of 7, just because 7's pretty close to 10. that would be a detriment, right? For water quality, it could be a range of pollutants because we already have water quality standards for those kind of things, but nitrates is a good one for that. And then ecological integrity is, algal blooms that occur because you're putting out those pollutants and those extra nutrients. Detriment of indigenous species and downstream impacts. That's something that EPA has become acutely aware of, is that most states nationwide have not been doing as thorough as a job as I think they would have liked for us to look at downstream impacts, right? Don't look at your project in a vacuum. It's how does that impact the greater good, right? Water doesn't just stay on one site. It's going to move, and you need to understand what that looks like. So getting into like mini watersheds, right? And really understanding what that impact is. So happy for you to share it. It's definitely long-winded, but it's a
Thank you.
challenge. It's definitely a struggle.
Yeah, I just want to weigh in. I mean, all of those are helpful examples, but I think when we regulate, I mean, I think the word detrimental effect is kind of, it's an outdated word, right? It's been in
Yeah.
these regs for decades. What we normally will talk about is sort of risk to the public health, right? A hazard, a public health hazard, something like that. And so typically, and I work in regs across our agency, we want to be careful not to sort of spell out an exhaustive list of what those things are, because if we just have a public health hazard, then it can be any of the above, like anything that Audra listed would count, right? And so we want to keep that breadth there
And that's
to
exactly why I
benefit
thought I'm concerned.
you as a local health official, so that you can say that that's a public health hazard. There you go, like whatever the thing is.
I just think because it is prescriptive, right? So one of the things
Mhm.
that you guys I would prefer to have, like, so okay, maybe it could be down to 7. You're in a nitrogen sensitive area. It's not going to be detrimental to the surface or groundwater if we bring it down to 7. I've been looking briefly at some of the other groups' YouTube videos and stuff. And one of the things I'd hoped that would come about with this is, 10 milligrams per deciliter. This is what we have for nitrogen in regular areas. When you're in a nitrogen sensitive areas, I was hoping that something like a little less, like a 7. Okay, so now we can be back on the fact of saying detrimental effect on ground or surface waters. Well, if we put it down to 7 or 8 or whatever, in an area that's nitrogen sensitive, it's going to less likely come back and put me into an appeals process with DPH again.
Yeah. So
Because that's
I
exactly what
just
it
I
was.
think I'm understanding your question better. Is like you are looking for specific standards for specific contaminants to help guide when something is actually a public health effect, like risk.
And it could be like guidance you guys provide us, because once we have those circulators, I use those from the 90s, 80s. I know Bob was, he kind of, Bob Smith, we kind of reference it. Like those things are what we hold on to. So even
Understood.
if it isn't something in the technical standard saying, okay,
Yeah.
well, if you're in a consent area, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. That's where my mind went too, is like, is this something that could live in the tech standards? Because what if you want to add something? What if the numbers change? What if new evidence comes out that 10 isn't enough and it does have to be 7, right?
What
Where
if
are we
it's
gonna?
5?
Right, right,
That's
right.
the new
Allow
one,
for that
right?
evolving
That's the new
evidence
number.
base.
Audra.
Right. Okay. Yeah, no, that's really helpful input, because I think, from a regulatory perspective, the way we see it is like, well, we want them to be able to include everything they need to, but then you're telling us like we need to have sort of a hard and fast standard so that we can actually defend that against the entity that's appealing because they don't agree that it's actually or they don't want to agree that it's actually a public health hazard. Okay,
So
that's helpful.
in the state water quality regs, we have numeric criteria, right? But then
Right.
we also have narrative standards, right? And
Mhm.
so the narrative is really that catch-all. You can't discharge anything that's toxic or gooey or foamy or whatever, right? It really you use both of them to the best of your ability, right? So the numerics are based on the science that's evolving,
Yep.
and then you have this backstop on the end for the narrative to give people that ability for whatever comes their way, right?
Hmm.
Thank you. Excellent. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yes, I'd like to kind of reiterate the same things. Detrimental is, boy, that's a huge, wide term. You could basically shut down anything and everything, right? For example, PFAS sure is new, and we know they're pretty bad, but nowhere do we have systems to treat them or any health code, definitions to treat them or requirements to treat them. So you could say, look, it's detrimental. You're shut down, or you can't develop this, or something like that. So I can understand, yeah, you need something pretty a little bit more specific, maybe not 7 milligrams per liter or something. I don't know what it would be, but and keep in mind when we talk 7 milligrams per liter or even 5, or we get below 10, it's tough for the manufacturers, the treatment providers, to provide those technologies that actually do that. Those are hard to come by at the single family level. They're even hard to come by at the wastewater treatment plant level, right? They'll tell you they meet you that all day, but if you go sample from their discharge points, they aren't hitting it. It's, they get to sample. It's kind of like the fox in the hen house, right? They get to do whatever they want. And oh, here's our samples. And we took them, after, 2 weeks after the rainstorm, after the plant calmed down a little bit. So I'm not trying to say sewage treatment plants are bad, but, they get away with murder. So I don't want to set the goal too high where we don't have technologies that can meet it. But I think the word detrimental is it's in need of a better definition, Sonia. I would agree. And the paragraph is funny because it starts off purely from a hydraulics perspective, right? Absorb and disperse. Okay, I just got to get rid of it. The old school thinking of on-site wastewater, just make it go away. So maybe that needs a change to absorb, disperse, and treat the expected blah, blah, blah without, so we do say without overflow and breakout, which is nice. So we're covering some of it, but then how are we covering the treatment? Maybe to be treated to levels acceptable or as required by the public health code, or, something like that. I don't know.
Dennis, spoken to somebody who actually works on the shoreline. You definitely have seen the same struggles that I have and some of the same threats of lawsuits, et cetera, down here. One thing I just wanted to remind though, so when we're talking about 10 milligrams per deciliter, we're talking about the whole entire property, right? So when we're talking about individual systems with AT, I think that's going to come with time because we don't have anything like that I know of that's assigned to each and every, say, manual, or what do they call it, proprietary system products. We don't have a nitrogen level to reduce that we use in the technical standards of the health code. So I just wanted to mention that because when I was talking about it, it's like, okay, so this whole property, they have to get it down to 10. Okay, well now maybe 7, I don't know, but not for the actual industry, meaning the AT products coming out, getting down to a certain level, because I agree with you, Dennis. I think that once we actually do that kind of stuff, that's exactly what we need to look at is what's coming out. I mean, 10 is almost impossible to get for an AT system consistently if you look at Suffolk counties and other states, but that's point discharge of the system, not the whole property. And I believe what we're talking about particular here is the actual whole property. Did I get that wrong, Dante? Because or Audra or anyone?
The whole property for
10 milligrams per deciliter to have the nitrogen.
Oh, with the nitrogen assessment? Yeah, I'd have to look at Matt's proposed nitrogen assessment, but I'm pretty sure there's like a little picture of the whole map. But Audra can speak to it because
Yeah, I
it's
think
borrowed from theirs.
Yeah, I
approach.
think he included property boundary. So we would say the point of environmental concerns, usually it's the property boundary. But and so something we've talked about in the environmental group is, you have property boundary. Like if you line these things up, right, you now have a potential to have a public health concern or environmental concern because you're looking at these in a vacuum. And you're not planning for that watershed approach. Never mind just keeping the water in the ground. So that's where that downstream use comes in.
I think probably definitely want to have this conversation with the whole big group too. So, all right, we went through the whole survey. I will take whatever comments you guys have, send them over to me. I will send out the ones that we've looked at. Go ahead, Jim, and then I'll continue. Jim, just pop his hand up. Go ahead, Jim.
The one concern that I've always had here in Connecticut, and it happens in other states too, is homeowner installations. But if we do get certification for our professionals, that will go away, and that makes me very happy. So probably the regulators as well. So just more bonus to the certification. So just want to throw that out there.
Okay, so thank you, Jim. So the other part of this is to make sure that each one of these questions that we can back it up with saying, okay, this is why it's good for the environment. This is why it's good for development or environmental health, environmental protection, and honestly, of course, I threw all this in AI, and it does show how each one of these answers and how it could protect the development, how it's going to make things more affordable and why, and if it's protective of the environmental health and protection of our communities. So I will try to add some of that together. Anything you guys want to send me though, I can absolutely put it in there. I really want this to be from all of us. I will send out whatever drafts I have to this group before anything goes online or anything like that. And then on Tuesday or Monday, I hope we can finalize this, get everyone to respond in the group, It would be great if everyone could just take that survey, respond to it, and then I'll put them in there. The one thing I would like to say though is there was one question that I want to make sure that we put, maybe even other right now, since you already have the survey, is something about yes, but with appropriate funding placed in there. I think that was one of the questions at the very top. So I'll adjust that and send that out. Actually, I'll do that. I'll adjust that and send it back out. Go ahead, Miriam.
Thanks, Sonia, and thanks for welcoming me back into the meeting, everyone. I do just want to flag that as state agencies, we're not necessarily going to be able to endorse any recommendations that are associated with cost, but can certainly say, you know, from a policy perspective, this makes sense or something along those lines, or provide information related to a recommendation, but just flagging that you all may see areas where we've provided feedback, but ultimately we can't really endorse, because we're happy to share information that's helpful and relevant. But ultimately, if it's not in the governor's budget.
Dante got you. She actually said that. She did. She's very
perfect. Then I'll shut up. Thank you.
And we will. So whatever you guys have, even that's a comment that I can at least put into next week's meeting, is this is what they said, and they're right. You know, this is state agencies. I get it. So you know, they're gonna what do they call that? They're not gonna answer whatever the heck it's called.
Thank you.
Great. I'll send that out. Again, anything you guys want me to put on it, we are now going to meet on Monday. Peter sure will send out an agenda. I'll get one going, and then we can finalize this and hopefully be ready on Wednesday to give our group our recommendations and why we consider it, we feel that they are protective of the environmental health and protection, as well as for development, meaning that this is going to help our developers get affordable housing and housing that's affordable to build. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. All right. Is there anyone have any other questions? Anyone want to bring up anything? No? All right. So I'll see you guys all Monday. Thank you. It's January 12th, Monday. I'll see you guys then. Thank you. And this meeting is